The 1976 World Championship of Formula One was the 27th season and the 19th International Cup for Formula One manufacturers. The two titles were contested over a 16-race series, which commenced on the 25th of January and ended on the 24th of October. Two non-championship races were also held during the 1976 season. In an extraordinarily political and dramatic season, the Drivers' Championship went to McLaren driver James Hunt by 1 point from Ferrari's defending champion Niki Lauda, although Ferrari took the manufacturer's trophy. The controversy began in Spain, where Hunt was initially disqualified from first place, handing the race win to Lauda, only for the decision to be overturned on appeal months later. Ferrari did not enter the Austrian Grand Prix out of protest. Hunt won in France and, it seemed, in Britain, but the race had been restarted after a first lap pileup and Hunt drove on an access road returning to the pits, which was against the rules. He was eventually disqualified after an appeal from Ferrari and Lauda became the official race winner. In this season there was the dramatic Lauda's accident during the Nürburgring GP and appeared likely to die from his injuries, but managed to return after missing just 2 races. The physical consequences of the accident, however, affected Lauda for his entire life, and although his activity as a driver continued with success and winning 2 more world championships, he was forced to undergo 2 kidney transplant operations. Going into the final race in Japan, Lauda led Hunt by 3 points. In the appalling weather conditions, Lauda withdrew from the race and Hunt finished third to take the championship trophy. In this season, the rivalry and friendship between the two pilots is well told in the 2013 film Rush. Other noteworthy events include the introduction of the revolutionary 6-wheeled Tyrrell P34, the last race by Chris Amon, regarded as one of the best F1 drivers never to win a championship, and the British Grand Prix, for being the only championship race ever in which more than one female driver were entered, although both failed to qualify. Despite the success of Gordon Murray's Cosworth-powered cars, Bernie Ecclestone signed a deal with Italian motor manufacturer Alfa Romeo to use their large and powerful flat-12 engine. The engines were supplied for free, but they rendered the new BT45S, now in red Martini racing livery, unreliable and overweight. 1974 champion Emerson Fittipaldi moved to his brother Wilson's team Fittipaldi Automotive, with Wilson taking on the role of manager instead of driver. Emerson's seat at McLaren was given to James Hunt. The Shadow team, which had entered into Formula One in the 1973 season under an American license, received a British license, thus becoming the first team to officially change its nationality. Meanwhile, they had trialed a Matra V12 engine in 1975, but without much success. So Guy Ligier, owner of various sports car operations, decided to buy the French company's assets and start a Formula One team. They hired Jacques Laffite from Williams. After a dismal 1975 season with Lotus, Jacques moved to the newly formed Wolf Williams Racing. Mario Andretti drove for Lotus in the opening race of the season and then acquired a permanent contract after his employer, the Parnelli team, folded. John Watson had moved from Surtees to Penske Racing at the end of 1975 and drove for them the whole 1976 season. BRM continued to decline, both in results and in operation size, only entering the first race of the 1976 season. Embassy Hill was scheduled to have entered a full season with Tony Bryce, but they pulled out following the Embassy Hill plane crash in November 1975, which killed all 6 members on the plane including Bryce and team owner Graham Hill. At the end of 1975, Ronnie Peterson was convinced by Colin Chapman to stay with Lotus, but after just 1 race into the 1976 season, the Swede joined March in favor of female driver Lella Lombardi. Fellow Swede Gunnar Nilsson, signed by March, was loaned to Lotus. Carlos Reutemann negotiated a release from his Brabham contract to act as a replacement to Lauda after his dramatic crash during Nürburgring Grand Prix. This would only lead to 1 drive, but the Argentinian was offered to a full-season drive in 1977. Reutemann's seat at Brabham was taken up by Rolf Stomlin and then Boros Larry Perkins. After seeing Lauda's crash, Chris Amon promptly retired from Formula One, until the Wolf Williams team persuaded him to return. However, after a heavy collision with another car during qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix, he was lucky to walk away unharmed and definitely hung up his helmet. Jackie Ickx finished the season with Amon's former employer Ensign, while Wolf Williams hired Arturo Merzario from the March team. In this season there was calendar changes. The Argentine Grand Prix at Buenos Aires was originally scheduled as the first round of the season on the 11th of January, but was cancelled, largely due to economic and political concerns. The United States Grand Prix West hosted its first Grand Prix. The race was held on a street circuit in Long Beach near Los Angeles on the 28th of March. The Spanish Grand Prix was moved permanently to Jarama near Madrid. This was done in reaction to the accident in the 1975 race in Montjuic, in which 5 spectators were killed. The Belgian Grand Prix and Monaco Grand Prix swapped places on the calendar so that the Monaco came second this time. Nivelles Ballers in Brussels was due to host the Belgian Grand Prix in rotation with Circuit Zolder, but the track surface at Nivelles had deteriorated and Zolder took over the slot. The British Grand Prix was moved from Silverstone to Brands Hatch, in keeping with the event-sharing arrangement between the two circuits. The Dutch Grand Prix was moved from mid-June to late August. The Canadian Grand Prix returned to the calendar, after it was cancelled in 1975 due to a dispute between two rival breweries and event sponsors, Labatt and Molson. The Japanese Grand Prix hosted its first Grand Prix with a 3-year contract. The race was held at Fuji Speedway on the 24th of October. But let's go now to discover a new epic, exciting and dramatic new Formula One season. For the opening round of the season in Brazil at the 4 km Interlagos circuit in Sao Paulo, James Hunt took pole position in his McLaren with reigning world champion Niki Lauda alongside in his Ferrari. Clay Regazzoni in the second Ferrari took the lead at the start. Regazzoni, Lauda, Hunt and Shadow's Jean-Pierre Jorier battled. Regazzoni and Jorier collided, and the former had to pit for repairs. Lauda now led from Hunt and Jorier, but Hunt crashed out due to a sticking throttle, and Jorier did the same a lap later after driving on some oil in the track. Lauda thus started his title defense with victory, with Patrick Depailler second in the Tyrrell, and Tom Price completing the podium in the other Shadow. At the Kyalami circuit near Johannesburg, Hunt took pole position for the second time in 2 races, with Lauda alongside again. It was Lauda who led into the first corner, with Hunt dropping down to 4th behind McLaren teammate Johan Mass and Vittorio Brambilla in his march. Hunt was waved through by Mass, and passed Brambilla to take second after 5 laps. Lauda led from start to finish to win again, with Hunt second and Mass third for McLaren. Well, after the South African race, the drivers assembled at Long Beach in the US for the 3rd round. Regazzoni took pole position with Depailler second, forcing Hunt and Lauda onto the second row. The top 4 maintained their positions at the start, and almost immediately Regazzoni began to pull away. Hunt now tried to pass Depailler for second. They collided, Hunt was out, Depailler went wide, and Lauda sailed through to second. Depailler kept third until a spin which dropped him well down the order, but he charged back up to 5th and was back in 3rd after Price's Shadow, and Jody Scheckter in the second Tyrrell retired after driveshaft and suspension failures respectively. Regazzoni went on to take a dominant victory, with Lauda completing the Ferrari 1-2, and Depailler third. As the European season began at the Jarama circuit near Madrid, there was a big talking point as the Tyrrell team entered a new P34 6-wheeler for Depailler. Depailler was on the pace and qualified third, behind Hunt and Lauda. Lauda once again beat Hunt off the line at the start and led for the first third of the race. Depailler, after a slow start, was running fourth behind Mas when he spun off and crashed with brake problems. Just before mid-race, the McLarens of Hunt and Mas found another gear and drove past Lauda, but towards the end of the race, Mas had to retire with an engine failure. Hunt took his first win of the season, with Lauda second and Gunnar Nilsson's Lotus third. After the race, Hunt was disqualified because his McLaren was found to be too wide. McLaren appealed, saying this was due to the expansion of the tyres during the race, and 2 months after the race, Hunt was reinstated. The fifth round was at the Zolder circuit near the Dutch-Belgian border. Ferrari locked out the front row, with Lauda on pole from Regazzoni. Lauda motored away as the start, with Hunt up to second, but soon Regazzoni took the place back. The Ferraris raced away, and Hunt dropped to sixth, behind Jacques Laffite's Ligia and the two six-wheel Tyrrells, before eventually retiring with a transmission failure. Depailler also retired when his engine blew up. Lauda won, and Regazzoni completed a dominant Ferrari 1-2, with Laffite taking his first podium. The sixth appointment of the season takes place in Monaco. Lauda took pole with Regazzoni alongside on the front row again. Lauda led into the first corner, and was never headed again. Ronnie Peterson's March got up to second, and allowed Lauda to pull away by holding up Regazzoni and the two Tyrrells. At 1/3 distance, Regazzoni went down an escape road because of oil on the track, and Peterson spun off and crashed on the next lap due to the same reason. This left Scheckter second and Depailler third, but Regazzoni charged back and passed Depailler. He, however, crashed out with 5 laps left while chasing Scheckter, thus ensuring that both the six-wheeled cars were on the podium behind Lauda. Lauda now had a massive 33-point lead in the championship over Regazzoni and Hunt. Scheckter took pole in Sweden at Anderstorp, the first for the Tyrrell P34, with Mario Andretti's Lotus second and Chris Amorn an amazing third on the grid in the Ensign. Andretti took the lead at the start, but went off with engine failure at around 2/3 distance. The six-wheelers went on to dominate, much to the chagrin of some of the other teams, and finished 1-2, with Scheckter winning. Amon was robbed of a possible podium by a suspension failure. As a result, third place went to the consistent Lauda. With Hunt finishing fifth, Scheckter was now second in the points for the World Championship. The French round took place at the Paul Ricard circuit in the south of France, and a normal service was resumed, with Hunt on pole and Lauda second, with Depailler third, continuing Tyrrell's strong form. Lauda beat Hunt off the line as usual, and led the early stages until his engine failed. Hunt now led with Regazzoni close behind, but Regazzoni's Ferrari engine also failed. With the Ferraris out, any challenge to Hunt evaporated, and Hunt went on to win with Depailler second. Scheckter ran third until he faded away with engine trouble, giving John Watson third and Penske its first podium. The British fans had found a new hero in Hunt, but it was Lauda who took pole at Brands Hatch, beating the home hero Hunt into second, and Andretti showing Lotus's pace with third. At the start, Regazzoni began like a rocket and was immediately up to second, and was challenging Lauda. The two touched, and Regazzoni spun. He was hit by Hunt and Jacques Laffite, but the rest of the field were away safely. However, there was too much debris on track, and the race was to be restarted. In controversial circumstances, McLaren, Ferrari and Ligier had Hunt, Regazzoni and Laffite all take part in the restarted race in spare cars. There was no trouble in the restart, as Lauda led from Hunt and Regazzoni into the first corner. The top three were unchanged till mid-race until Regazzoni retired with a gearbox problem, promoting Scheckter to third. Lauda led comfortably until he too suffered from gearbox troubles, and home hero Hunt took the lead with 15 minutes left, sending the home fans wild. Hunt went on to win, with Lauda hanging on to second and Scheckter third. After the race, Ferrari, Tyrrell and the Fittipaldi team appealed against Hunt being allowed to take part in the spare car. Ferrari took the matter to the FIA, which was hypocritical since their own driver, Regazzoni, had started in a spare, although he retired, and 2 months later, Hunt was disqualified and Lauda was given the win. Scheckter was promoted to second, Watson had another podium, and two-time champion Emerson Fittipaldi got 6th place and a point. There were concerns by the drivers in the German GP held at the legendary Nordschleife about the safety of the track. The mountainous Nordschleife section of the Nürburgring was 23 kilometers long, almost 3 times longer than Interlagos, the next longest circuit on the calendar, and 7 times longer than the Monaco Street Circuit, and its size meant it was nearly impossible to manage it safely to 1976 regulatory standards. The organizers were not willing or able to provide up to 5 times the marshals, medical services and firefighters needed at this circuit than at any other F1 circuit. Ultimately, all the drivers decided to race, and it was no surprise that Hunt and Lauda were on the front row, the British driver on pole, with Depailler heading the second row. At the start, on a damp but drying track, once again it was Regazzoni who started off best, whereas Lauda was slow and lost a lot of places. Regazzoni was leading from Hunt, but he spun and dropped to 4th. At the end of the first lap, over 8 minutes after the race started, most of the drivers decided to pit for dry tires. This left Mass's McLaren leading from Gunnar Nilsson. On the second lap, Lauda lost control at high speed due to a suspected rear suspension failure and crashed into the barriers before bouncing back onto the track, and the car caught fire. The car was then hit by Harold Little's Hesketh and Brett Lunger's Surtees. The two drivers immediately got out of their cars, and soon Arturo Merzario stopped his Wolf Williams as well, and also Guy Edwards helped. The four pulled Lauda out of the burning car, and the race was stopped. It took the one helicopter at the track an excruciating 5 to 6 minutes to get to the accident site, and Lauda was sent to hospital with serious burns, and was fighting for his life. The race restarted, with the starting slots of Lauda, Litle and Lunger left empty. Hunt led at the restarted race with Regazzoni up to second, but this did not last long as Regazzoni spun off and dropped back, and Depailler hit the barriers while trying to avoid him. This left Hunt with a big lead ahead of Carlos Pace in the Brabham team showing some speed. Soon, Scheckter was up to second, and Pace was passed by a recovering Regazzoni. Hunt eased to victory ahead of Scheckter, and Mass completed the podium by passing Pace after Regazzoni spun off again. With Hunt's crucial victory at this longest of racing circuits, and after 49 years of Grand Prix racing, the 1976 German Grand Prix was the last Grand Prix at the old Nürburgring, one of the most iconic, historic and legendary circuits in motorsport. The German Grand Prix moved further south to the Hockenheimring, and Grand Prix racing did not return to the Nürburgring until 1984 on the newly constructed 4.5 km Grand Prix circuit. The news before the Austrian GP at the Osterreichring was that Lauda's condition was no longer life-threatening, but there was a low attendance with Lauda not racing, and Ferrari were so shaken by Lauda's crash that they did not compete at all. Hunt meanwhile took pole, ahead of countryman Watson and Ronnie Peterson. Watson took the lead at the start ahead of Peterson and Hunt, but soon Peterson was in the lead. Scheckter was on a charge from the midfield, and he took the lead on the 10th lap, but then Watson was back in front. Scheckter battled until he crashed due to a suspension failure, and Peterson ultimately began to drop back. Watson thus won, the result being his and Penske's first win, and the podium was completed by Laffit and Nilsson. Lauda had begun his recovery, and was planning to race later in the season, and as a result, Ferrari were back in business in the Netherlands, but with only one car for Regazzoni. It was Peterson who took pole at Zandvoort, beating pole king Hunt and Tom Pryce's Shadow. Peterson led the early stages ahead of Watson, until Watson made a mistake which let Hunt through. Peterson then struggled and dropped behind Hunt, Watson, and Regazzoni. Watson retired with a gearbox failure, promoting Regazzoni and Peterson, but the latter also retired when he lost oil pressure. Regazzoni now closed up on Hunt, bringing Mario Andretti with him, but Hunt held them off, with Regazzoni and Andretti within 2 seconds of him in second and third. After the Dutch GP, with Hunt only 2 points behind Lauda, the championship seemed to be a cakewalk for him, but then came the news that Lauda was going to make an astonishing return for the last 4 races of the season. It was so unexpected that Ferrari had to run 3 cars for Lauda, Regazzoni, and Lauda's supposed replacement Carlos Reutemann, just 6 weeks after his accident. As the event went on at the modified Monza circuit, Laffit took pole in qualifying, with Scheckter's 6-wheeler alongside and Pace third. Lauda was 5th, and Hunt along with Watson and Mass were penalized and sent to the back because of supposed fuel irregularities. At the start, Scheckter led ahead of Laffit and Depailler with Lauda down in the midfield, but soon Peterson was on a charge and took the lead after 14 laps. Peterson's charge also brought Regazzoni with him, and soon the Swiss was up to third. Scheckter dropped off, and the top four of Peterson, Depailler, Regazzoni, and Laffite ran closely. Hunt spun off while trying to charge up the field, and Depailler dropped back late on with engine trouble. Peterson took his first win in 2 years, with Regazzoni second, Laffite third, and Lauda an incredible fourth. The week-long North American tour started with the teams assembling at the scenic Mossport Park track near Toronto for the Canadian Grand Prix. Hunt's disqualification from the British GP came after the Italian race, and as a result Hunt had only 47 points to Lauda's 64 with 3 races left. The Englishman took pole, with Peterson also on the front row ahead of March teammate Vittorio Brambilla. As usual, Hunt did not start well, and Peterson took the lead, but it was not for long as Hunt retook the lead on lap 10, and soon both Marches dropped way back, and so Depailler was second and Andretti third. The top 3 of Hunt, Depailler, and Andretti were unchanged for the rest of the race. Lauda was running 5th until handling issues dropped him out of the points, and Hunt had closed the gap to 8 points. The penultimate round and the second leg of the North American Tour was in the US at Watkins Glen, New York, a circuit similar, and close by, to Mossport Park in that it was fast and scenic with a number of long, sweeping corners. Hunt took his 8th pole of the season, with a 6-wheeler of Scheckter alongside, and Peterson third. As expected, Scheckter took the lead at the start, with Hunt and Brambilla following. The front two pulled away and battled, with Hunt passing Scheckter mid-race and Scheckter returning the favor a few laps later. Hunt took the lead again with 14 laps left and went on to win, and Scheckter had to settle for second. The Marches were again unable to keep up the pace, and it was left to Lauda to take an astonishing podium, just beating Mass in the second McLaren. The championship was to be decided in Japan at the Fast Fuji Speedway near Tokyo, and Lauda was leading Hunt by 3 points. In qualifying, Hunt took second, but Lauda was right behind in third as Andretti took pole for Lotus. On race day, it rained heavily, and the weather was dreadful with the track full of water and the rain pelting down. Hunt got a good start for once, and took the lead from Andretti. Some of the drivers protested, saying it was too dangerous to race. At the end of the second lap, Lauda came into the pits and withdrew, saying that the conditions were too dangerous. Emerson Fittipaldi and Carlos Pace also withdrew. At the front, Hunt was leading but was soon challenged by Brambilla until the Italian spun out of contention. By mid-race, Mass had jumped up to second behind his teammate and acted as a protective buffer, but then crashed out. Hunt led from Depailler and Andretti, but then began to suffer from tyre wear, and both drivers passed with 11 laps left. This was still fine as Hunt was third and needed only 3 points to become world champion, because he had more wins than Lauda. This became second when Depailler's tyres gave out, and he suffered a puncture, but soon Hunt himself also had the same fate and had to pit. Andretti now led, with Alan Jones's Surtees second, Regazzoni third, Depailler fourth and Hunt fifth. On old, worn-out tyres, Jones and Regazzoni were fighting just to save their tyres, and first Depailler, and then Hunt with just 2 laps left passed both of them. Andretti won, getting his first win in 5 years, with Depailler second, and Hunt's third place meant that he was the F1 World Champion of 1976.